Well, I'm back with a story for you. It's about the time my clutch fell out in New York City while I was driving. I'll give you a little background on the story. I had an International Scout in 1966. It was a 1964 model, and it had a 4-cylinder engine in it, which wasn't very powerful. And back in those days, I was into Jeeps and Jeeping and four-wheeling, and I wanted more power. So I found myself a Buick V6 engine in the junkyard. A running engine. I paid $150 for it. And I was going to put this engine into my International Scout, which I did. It was quite a project. Back then, parts to make this conversion were not readily available. And one of the magazines I read was called Four Wheeler. It was published in California, and most all of the four-wheel drive information for four-wheeling was in magazines like this. And one of the advertisers in the magazine, the company's name was Dick CPEC, had an adapter kit, so I could adapt the International Scout transmission to the Buick engine. Now my next project was where can I do this? I didn't have a garage to work in. I was basically a curbside, street side mechanic. But I was good friends with the industrial arts teacher. Now you call it technology. And during midwinter break, he allowed me to use the high school shop to do this engine swap. Putting the engine in was quite interesting. I had to fabricate motor mounts and all kinds of things. And one of the things I had to fabricate from scratch was my clutch linkage. The clutch linkage is what connects the clutch pedal to the clutch throw-out arm, which activates the clutch release. I was in a rush, and I cobbled something together. I thought I was slick. I drove into the shop in the morning, pulled my old engine, put the new one in, changed the front shaft on the transmission, and cobbled up a clutch linkage. Drove it out that evening. I drove that vehicle around for a few months with no problems. Now one Saturday morning, I wanted to take a trip down to New York City. I lived in Lower Westchester County. I lived about 20 miles from downtown Manhattan. And I'm going down the West Side Highway to go to Canal Street. Canal Street is an east and west street, and one end of it goes in, I believe it's the Lincoln Tunnel. And on this street was a whole bunch of military surplus stores. And I used to like to go down there and rummage through the stuff and find what was cool and bring it home and have fun with it, monkey around with it, and it was cool. So I'm driving down the West Side Highway. The West Side Highway is a artery that runs parallel with the Hudson River on Manhattan Island. And as I was getting near Canal Street, I hit a pothole. And I hear this clunk, jingle, clunk, bang outside. And I looked in the rearview mirror and I see some metal parts bouncing around in the street. And of course there's traffic. There's no place to stop. No place to pull over to go back and see what fell out of my car. And then I pushed the clutch in, and there was no action. I says, oh my gosh, my clutch linkage fell out. And by now, I was quite a ways down the highway, and no way would I be able to get back there to find those parts. What do I do? No clutch in lower Manhattan. I remembered that I had tried shifting sometimes without using the clutch, synchronizing the speed of the transmission with the speed of the engine, and I was able to slide the gears from one to the other. I could upshift, I could downshift. I was pretty good at it. I say, well, I got to get this thing home, because if I park it down here in the city, I come back for it, it's going to be up on blocks with no tires, because they'll strip that baby so quick you could blink an eye. So I go down through the Battery Tunnel, up the East Side Highway, and then the East Side Highway goes over to a toll booth on an island in the middle of the East River. One side of the island has roads going to the Bronx, the other side goes over to Westchester County, and the other side is to Manhattan Island. I'm approaching the toll booth. What do I do? Did not have automatic toll takers. I had to stop the vehicle to pay the toll. Now, how do you put a car in gear when you don't have a clutch? You have to have the engine running to do this. But I say, I'll shut the engine off, roll into the toll booth, pay the toll, then while the engine is still off, shift the car into first gear and start the engine in gear. Voila! It worked. So I started in gear, and then upshifted into second, and then into third, and I finally made it home. Then I spent the rest of the weekend fabricating new clutch linkage. And boy, you can bet this new linkage I made wasn't about to fall out like the first linkage did. That was quite an adventure. I learned a lot from it. And if I had to do it all over, I would. Bye. Now we'll see how that goes.